Look, that's how much of a loser I am. On Friday night, I got nothing to do and I'm just going live. So you're in for a treat because as soon as my Instagram shows up, I'm going to hit the go live button there. And I just wanted to go live because something's happening right now in Congress. And, I saw it happen this morning, or I guess last night, when it started to kind of start to occur. And this event that occurred in Congress was happening. And I'm like kind of pounding the wall at the narrative that should be coming out of it. But the narrative that came out of it was different than what should have came out of it. Finally, today, it finally came to the narrative that it should have been first. So what am I talking about? Well, I'm talking about the fact that we actually had to get bipartisan legislation done on a core issue that has been a partisan issue. And because of the wackiness of the Republican Party, they couldn't get something done that was the life or death situation in Ukraine. They couldn't get it done because of the faction of the party that's way ape shit off the wall, that's forcing retirements. They could not get it done. So they had to get Democrats to help them. And so now they've got Democrats helping them get a bill passed. I'm having deja vu about this moment. I kid you not. Like right as I'm thinking, I'm like, did I dream this? I mean, this is how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have bipartisan, legislation across things. And if you think about how the system should work, it should work where, all right, look, I'm a Republican from this state, and this issue that Republicans take on really doesn't do anything for my constituents. So, you know what? I'm kind of willing to bend on this issue because I'll get maybe some bends on other issues. That's the horse trading that should be happening, not party line votes. It does happen behind the scenes. As I've talked about before in previous live streams, I've mentioned that like there are a lot, if you start to look at the records of these folks, there's a lot of bipartisan legislation that gets done, a lot of resolutions and not the big, not the big, campaign catalyst, get you off your ass and vote kind of issues. But it's the narrative. And let me just walk through the narrative. Let me back up a little bit, just walk through as it was kind of happening. So the Republicans are trying to get this legislation done. And of course, they've got the crazy wacko folks just saying, no, we don't want to do anything. We just pro America first, do nothing for anybody, yada, yada, except in the case of Israel, of course, then whatever. So, and if I'm painting this wrong, I don't give a shit because the point I'm making is going to stand out. And so as they're coming to this conclusion that Republicans, who are the majority in the House, a thin majority, trying to get this vote done, little Barbie doll looking fucking Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, trying to get that stuff done. And he realizes he can't because the crazies. And so now the only way he's kind of like putting real security at risk, real relationships, real foreign policy. And by the way, there was a time when we had there was always a united front on the foreign policy. It was like, all right, we bickered about the home thing, but when we're representing the world, we were united. A lot of the time that was kind of like the way of the world. And not because of everyone agreed, but because we had to have a united front and representation. And so, now with social media and everyone else wanting a platform, you've got senators spouting out their own fucking foreign policy, for Christ's sake. Anyway, let's get back to the core of what's happening. So the story is like this. Republicans are struggling to get legislation done. They are having trouble with a wing of their party, the Marjorie Greene Taylors of the party, that just don't want to work with government. They want to rip the whole thing down. They were probably part of the insurrection crowd. I mean, I think it's kind of a hush-hush, wink-wink that Marjorie Greene Taylor is part of that crowd. So we've got that crazy faction that's not willing to budge on stuff. And by the way, this is like your job. This is like their job to get stuff done. And so now all of a sudden, folks are saying, no, we're not going to pass this bill. And you're like, what bill could it be? Well, it's a bill that basically deals with the security of another country that we have a relationship with. And it's basically essentially talking about, as I understand it, I'm totally winging this, but I understand it, is there's There's funding that needs to happen in order to continue to put up the front against the incoming Russian invasion that happened. And so I think that's the position that they're talking about. Um, again, let's just move aside the issue. The whole thing that I was blown away by it was the narrative was, Republicans can't get it done and they have to get Democrats to do it. And I was thinking, like, it would annoy me because even though it might look like a win for Democrats, like, all right, look, you guys are weak. No, that's like it's a news article that they're doing bipartisanship, and that's the fucked up part. Like, it should be like that all the time. You have your issues, your stance, but then when it comes down to it, you're serving your constituents first. So when my representative is up in fucking Pennsylvania talking about the border, I'm just like, I don't care about well, you should care about the border. No, I don't. I don't. In Lancaster County, in the middle, far, far away from the southern border, I don't give a shit about the border. I know they do, and they can worry about that. They can fight about it. I'm sure that any invasion that you guys think is coming, we're going to be fine. I just don't get it. It's weird. So that would be an issue where he could say, you know what, guys, I'm going to go with the Democrats on the border issue because I'm not really, I'd rather have the funding to fund my schools and maybe deal with some of the water issues or the streets in my community. I don't know. But that would be somewhere he could bend because, quite frankly, why does he care about the border? Well, it's a national security. Then it's a national. Come on. Stop it. Stop. We're not getting invaded by a bunch of immigrants. No guns, nothing. They're just going to come in and invade. It's so stupid when you start thinking about what the fear is. And I know what the underlying fear is of the loss of that supreme role of whiteness that might be gone with the influx of brown people. Because, the white people coming from the top are coming in. Let's not get into it, right? But the craziness, it's the crazy. And so you have this kind of faction that's always kind of going off and doing their things. And part of the reason I believe that you've seen so many like high profile Republican retirees, young retirees. There's one just retiring at like 36 from Congress. Paul Ryan was like 49. Yeah, he was in his prime. Like, I could run someday. I'm thinking like, hey, maybe if I get my shit together, maybe I'm 65, I'll run for something. Like, he's done. He said, fuck it. Like, he's done. Right. So you start to think about that. And I think the writings on the wall is that there's a part of the Republican Party that's unmanageable. From a leadership standpoint, it's unmanageable. And they will buy into whatever their icon, their demagogue, whatever that demagogue directs them to do, they'll do. And so I think a lot of people see that in Congress as dysfunctional. So my point really for making this surprise bonus live is really to talk about the fact that it's become a news article that we have bipartisanship on a core issue. And I think that's bullshit. I think I would love to see even our senator, our congressman representing our best interests, and then maybe horse trading with somebody that maybe you don't care about it. I understand how it works. Let me just give you a perfect example of a problem that we deal with in Pennsylvania that has to do with this weird kind of mix of worrying about your local. So it's not all roses. When you talk about how the roads are funded in Pennsylvania, they're funded based on the length of the road, not based on how many people travel on that road. So you think about it, if you're going to optimize funding for that, you're going to have your best bang for your buck if you can pave a lot of road and say, look how many miles of road we paved. It doesn't matter that maybe 4 people traveled on it. And if you take a drive through Pennsylvania, you'll find that driving through the cities are rough and shitty, but you go through the rural and it's like you get through these nice little winding, beautiful lanes. Well, it's because it's easier to do those state roads that don't have to go through city permits and everything else. And plus the funding is incentivized, or at least it was. If this has changed, I don't care. It's a great example anyway. This is one I used up until probably 3 years ago when it was real. So I haven't followed state politics for long. I'm hating. Point is, I think that's still the funding. I should have double checked this. But that is an example, and you can see this. The bottom line is you can see the effects of that when you drive around Pennsylvania. So whether they fixed it or not, you can definitely see that the country roads are nice. I grew up in the country. It was I remember, like, and we had some state roads that went through there. So It was like they were really nice. So that was kind of something where, and so one of the things that happens there is you have rural people that are elected kind of saying, look, we want to continue to get that funding, so give us X funding. So you have this weird fight for the funding of this to make sure their roads are okay. And of course, everyone's doing it for their best interest. The real argument I'm trying to make is it can also be bad where people are just fighting for their own interests. But in the case of the US Congress, I'm arguing that I would like to see more people step away from those issues that are so divisive because they really don't affect the constituents in their town or area or whatever. Smucker, I'm talking to you. Come on, bro. I'm seriously sick of hearing about the freaking migrants and the invasion, the border from up here. What the fuck is that? That's so weird. So honestly, that would be a place where I would have much respect for him if he said, you know what, it is something that's important to our party. There's national security implications. But on this issue, I feel like this funding could work for my constituents better. Hoo-wee, wow, you did something for us and not for your reelection. Fantastic. Look, again, I'm not taking away from the character of the man. I'm just saying I'm not okay with some of the ideas and the way he operates in many cases. So I picked on him. But the bottom line is this live came from my kind of rage at the whole narrative that was built, that this is a magnificent opportunity. Like, it's like, wow, like it finally came around to, wow, this is bipartisan. But it started out with like this, oh my gosh, what a failure. And it's like, it can't be the Republican or the Speaker of the House's job to have, like, if something gets passed bipartisan, that's good for him or her or they, whatever it is. So like, I don't understand like the idea that, I mean, you see these Speaker of the House just kind of come and go in the Republican Party. One of the things that they're all doing is they continue to placate to this party. This guy actually didn't. So there's a chance that he may actually have a better stance, a better long-term plan for Republicans than any previous speaker. So even as I make and I cast, aspersions on his aesthetics, I will say that, if you think about it, this is actually good for him. And I think, quite frankly, it's something that no one else has done for the last several years, which is why these people are falling off. Boehner was the last one to try to do it. And he even talked about it when he got out of office, that he couldn't even act like he was friends with Obama when he was in office because people just didn't like that. They wanted to see that division. He saw the writing on the wall where that was starting to proliferate into folks that were getting elected. So he left, kind of pre-Trump era, saw that coming and was out. I'm making all kinds of speculation. That's why you came here. Probably why you're watching. It's Friday night. If you're watching me and you're probably as bored as I am. But it's really interesting. I'd love to see more of a bipartisan effort on any kind of bill that's mainstream, even party line. Like, for instance, healthcare. I want to see Republicans come over the side and say, look, my constituents really want this. It may not agree with the line with some of my principles at the core, but at a core it does, because we're about conserving money. And this is a long-term savings for everybody by grouping us into a public option and basically using the math and using the aggregate amount of people that you can level out that risk over. Of course, having the largest population, of course, the math works out to having the largest pool and spreading that over the largest population makes sense. So why wouldn't you have one single payor system or some kind of universal healthcare where everybody was covered and everyone shared the risk? It makes sense in a conservative viewpoint. It's actually the most conservative thing. So this would be an opportunity for conservatives to say, you know what, I know you guys, you're the Delaware state, you're the insurance state. I understand why you got to hold the line. But in my case, I'm in Alabama, and as much as we're a conservative state, my folks really need this universal health care. So I'd love to see it. Maybe, this is me fantasizing about what could be possibly about, seeing this kind of this accidental bipartisanship kind of, and the media draw this narrative of, wait, it's a big mistake. And so now finally MSNBC, probably 15 minutes before I went on, I saw one of the mainstreams. That was the first one that came up that said, hey, look, we're shit. I didn't even check my sound. Probably not in sound. So they finally were like, you know what, this is actually supposed to be the way it's supposed to work. And I'm like, all right, finally, all right, good. Because if we continue to call this a loss for Republicans, then Republicans are going to not do this thing. Same thing with Democrats. If you frame it like, all right, Mike Johnson basically lost by getting Democrats on board. No, we won because we got legislation that was needed. Look, you can argue about the need of the legislation. That is a viable and a valuable argument to be made. And I'm not even talking, I probably wasn't even talking clearly about it as far as if someone were to put this up in an academic room, they'd be like, this guy's arguments, break them down. They're horrible, right? My larger takeaway, and hopefully that if you can extract any value out of this one, and if I watch it again, if I can extract the value out of it, is that the narrative that almost took place enraged me because it was a narrative that said this was a loss for Republicans. And as somebody who has not been on the side of Republicans, I was a little bit perturbed calling it a loss when we had Democrats go to the other side to get something done. Because let's just say that's a functional government. That's where we have government. That's where we get things done. When we have party line votes, it just completely divides folks. So anytime I would see a party line vote that's a true party line vote, I have to question why and why there isn't more consensus on that methodology, or why would you even present that bill, or why wouldn't you come up with some collateral? So this mistake, this potential loss for Republicans, which the media, at least one outlet, has decided to reframe as being this is the way it should be. Let's hope that carries on because I'd like to see more of it. And if I'm going to get some of the things that I care about, and I'm talking about me, the issues that I care about that are important to me, I know that there's no way, based on the gerrymandered shit storm that we have in this country, Democrats are ever going to have a majority of everything to get everything done. So what does that mean? It means we have to have bipartisanship. We have to get people on board with it. And part of what I believe is the key to that is helping people understand the real issues and the real data. And then if Democrats are wrong on it, we fucking throw it out. And by the way, I just want to say to that, a lot of times when you have these issues that you want to put it together a program to fix, you can start a program and say, all right, we're going to put this money towards it. And then it can easily be sabotaged. And so social issues don't just change overnight. So they take time, and they take kind of like they're the tentacles of corruptive, social kind of corruption that can lead to all the trauma and bullshit. Those things don't just like come out with some like sunlight. They're in the cracks. And so it takes a lot more than just like some money and some, all right, well, 2 years it didn't work. I mean, some of this stuff's generational. So like for us to say, all right, this didn't work in 10 years, sometimes when you're talking about a social issue, it doesn't work. So I think a lot of what I like to see happen is going to require bipartisanship. It's going to require education for understanding, like, look, this isn't to try to minimize your group or elevate this group necessarily in this case. This is to equalize this systemic issue, whatever it is. Okay. So all in all, I know I kind of went off on a tangent. I know I had no announcement to go on, which no one listens anyway, but I wanted to just get on and put on the record that, I probably should have got on live this morning and said, look, this is really raging me. This isn't a loss for Republicans. And then to see it kind of come full circle finally, I'm glad, because that's the first take was no, this is like good. All right, cool. You lose the crazies. You guys, both parties, by the way, if we have something we need to get done and we have a wing of the Democratic Party that's hanging on to something, I welcome Republicans to come over and get it done if it's something that's for the benefit of everybody, not just some bullshit, pork, whatever that term. I always wondered what pork came from, all that shit. But anyway, we'll have to dive into that. The idea that, all this extra funding is going nowhere. It's important to watch that stuff. But I think that I want to see more bipartisanship. And I am very excited about the fact that they framed it correctly. I'm getting called. Anyway, that's it. Probably no sound or something. All right.
Hey,